Wow, we are all Africans. Wow, we are all Africans.
What is your full name and what does it mean?
My name is Remy Ngamije. Remy is a French first name, and according to my research that I did once long ago, was derived from the Latin Remus, who was the brother of Romulus, the son of Rome. And they were both raised by I can't remember what the name of the wolf is, but they were suckled by this wolf, and they had a disagreement about which of the hills of 7 hills of Rome, I think, on which to found the city. But Remus was related to Romulus. And I think, yeah, that much. And then I remember it also comes from another word meaning oarsman, or one who has a good sense of humor. And then Ngamije, my surname, is Kinyarwanda, and that means in an abstract way that I am heading towards something or aiming towards something or desiring in a constructive and participative manner towards something. So it's not just directionless desire, it's that I want that thing, and so I'm going to make my way towards it. In a less esoteric way, perhaps you could call it determination or drive or something. So, but Ngamije particularly means that there's something on the horizon far away that you can see that you're making your way towards, not just desiring it without action. I'm sure other people who are more well versed in Rwandan law could give a better answer, but according to my queries and interests and curiosities, that's what I've been told. And I think it makes sense.
That's one of the questions. Do you know who named you and do you feel that your name makes sense to you?
Remy was chosen by my parents in lieu of Oscar, which I'm thankful for because I think Oscar's a terrible name. And I think they changed at the last minute. So they chose Remy instead of Oscar. And then Ngamije, I think, was chosen by my father, of course, in agreement with my mom, because Ngamije is also the name of a great grandfather. Someone in the family tree also has that name. And so I carry that name as well. And I think something important to note is that Rwandan families, at least those who have stuck with the cultural aspects of the country, we don't take our parents' surnames. So there's like different surnames in our house, and I have my great grandfather's, one of the great great grandfathers. I need to look at the family tree again to see which one it is, but it's a name that two of us now carry.
In your culture, parents' name, the first name, and the surname.
Yeah. So we choose technically according, I think, again, according to how it's all been explained to me, is that your Rwanda name is your name, but then because of Christianity, everyone who was baptized got given typically a French first name, and then your Rwanda name, according to colonial administrative practices, became your surname. So parents typically choose one or both. In the absence of parents, I think then it all goes according to like the seniority of the family or the clan. But I know my parents named all of us.
And do you feel that, does your name feel anchored to a place?
I think it's not anchored to a place, but it speaks to a particular origin, where I come from. My small village in Rwanda, in Gisenyi, it speaks to that, where I come from, the way my parents moved from that place to Kigali, where we were born, me and my siblings. And then from Rwanda, where I come from, and our journey through migration. So it speaks to where I'm from, but not necessarily to where I am anchored to. We are a family that has been in migration, and I've been in various movements myself between various identities. So it doesn't necessarily anchor me or chain me to a place, but it is a source of origin. And so in moments of directionless, you can always find comfort knowing where you're from, even if you don't know where you're going.
stay with where you come from for a moment. So, what did you learn early about belonging and about not belonging?
Belonging is a very hard one, but I can tell you that the first source or the first feeling of belonging comes from family. I have always been aware that I am someone's child, that I'm the second born but firstborn son. I have an older sister, I have two younger brothers. So I've always known my place within the sibling unit. And then I know my place within the family unit. Because of migration and diaspora, I do not have a good connection with my extended family or our family clan. But belonging for me has always been anchored within that primary sibling and parental community. And then beyond that, even through migration, our family has always been tethered to our neighbors, whoever we call our neighbors, even if they're not next to us. They could be far streets away or a suburb away, but we call them neighbors because in times of need, they will show up for us. And so I've always had a very keen understanding that I am someone within the family unit. And then outside of that, I'm someone within our local geography. And then, of course, I've always been a part of like various education systems. I have always been a member of a particular grade or class. I've always been a particular member on a basketball or soccer team. I've always been someone within a particular larger community. And that has always spoken to belonging. So belonging is really something that bounces off the presence of the other. And not belonging has also been premised on now you not belonging, but you being the other, i.e., you're not from here, i.e., you're not like us, i.e., you don't believe the same that we do, or you don't practice the same things that we do. And that is what has been used to define the other. So, as a foreigner, as a foreign national, I've always had a keen understanding of not belonging because at very painful instances at times, I've been told that you do not belong because of X, Y, Z, and the other. However, belonging or not belonging has always been something that's contentious. And the way I've come to finally define is that even if you do not belong anywhere, ultimately you belong to yourself because within the self is also a completeness, a geography of personhood that gives its own identity from which you can draw on sources of inspiration and well-being, knowing that you are a person, a whole complete person, and acknowledging that completeness is also a primary gateway to building community around you.
Hmm. Yeah, and now you're talking about community. You were mentioning the fact that movement is part of your life. You moved across places. What is your migration journey?
I was born in Kigali, in Rwanda. We moved to Kenya through DRC to Kenya in 1994. We lived in Kenya for about a year and a couple of months. And then we moved to Namibia in Windhoek, where I currently reside and where I am now a citizen in what I call home. I'm going to study for a couple of years in South Africa. So I've moved around quite a bit. I've been fortunate enough to travel inside and outside Namibia. And all of that has always been defined by movement, but not just geographic movement. I think that's a very narrow way of thinking about about movement in terms of geography. I've moved between interests, between personalities, traits, between identities. I have pendulum swung between particular ways of being and ways of thinking. And that itself is also movement. So it's not always just the physical movement across time, but also like intellectual, spiritual, emotional movement. And so those things have not been constant in my life either. And those are not constantly shifting or fluctuating. Now, as I've gotten older, there are certain principles that I do adhere to and that I hold on to dearly. But everything is there's always room for change. So it's not that nothing is permanent. I'd say nothing is fixed.
So, growing up across different countries, different interests, as you said, different movements, different classes, different identities, what did you learn to adapt? And what did you refuse to change?
Adaptation is a necessary form of survival. You need to know how to live within a particular geography wherever you are in the world. And by adaptation really means taking on the most desirable traits of a given community, whatever those might be. I think that's the primary gateway to adapting. You figure out what makes a community whole and what drives it and what is valuable and important to it. Some communities are based on participation, some are based on the accumulation of wealth, some are based on a particular belief, some are based on particular political leanings. Anything can be used to define community, and adaptation within that community means I'm taking those particular traits. Moving around, I've always been exposed to, I think, some of the best and also some of the harshest aspects of community. The things I've taken on, I think in a lot of ways, now that I'm old and reflecting, have always been voluntary because I've always been given a choice about whether I want to belong or not. And the choice to belong has always been like, okay, well, then you're going to have to do this, that, and the other. What I have resisted are things that do not resonate with me or what I consider my soul to be. So there's certain prejudices that I've never gravitated towards, that I shun those vehemently and at times quite aggressively. Am I malleable? Yeah, it depends on the circumstances, but I am not pliable. That I can admit. I'm quite stubborn. If I believe something, I will be very set in my ways about it, and it will take a lot of effort to change hard coded beliefs. But I am adaptable because movement is necessary, and movement is, in a way, inevitable. So, not being unyielding is not a particularly good survival trait. However, there's just certain principles that echo through the space and time that cannot be negotiable. And being pliable when it comes to those principles is not my strongest trait. So I can admit that about myself.
And what are those principles?
I think principles, what everyone would understand as justice, as equality, equity, and fairness, those are things that I'm not willing to yield on. I do believe that there is a certain sense of moralism or morality that does not infringe upon people's right to enjoy the quality and dignity that they deserve in life. And those things I'm not willing to negotiate upon. I'm not willing to negotiate with things that bring people joy, not happiness, which is something sugary and fleeting and very hard to explain. But joy is something that adds warmth and feeling to the harshness that is life. I cannot compromise on things that bring people joy. And those things are not worth the sacrifices that people are often asked to make. So rest is something that is not negotiable. If you do not rest, if you don't find some way to relax and detach from the world and its concerns and worries, you cannot hope to survive this world. So rest is non negotiable. This has not always been the case with my life, but it is something increasingly that I'm just, what are we doing? Why are we working ourselves to the bone, to the death? Rest is not negotiable. Um, yeah, fairness, kind speech. Everyone conducts themselves in a way that sometimes makes you wonder whether everyone believes that the world outside is their mother's house, if you know that term. Uh, no, the world is not your mother's house. And so changing the way you speak in public and the way you conduct yourself is non negotiable. And I think increasingly we have to remind everybody that the world is not built around you and that the public space is for everybody, not just a subsection. And once you realize that, changing behaviors in private and public spaces becomes a necessary form of adaptation and survival. How I act at home is not how I act outside my home. And I think that is important. What else is non negotiable? I think during the course of my life, I've been shown that family is a non negotiable value for me. I am always willing to go above and beyond for my kith and kin. I think the friendships that I have and that I nurture are not ones that I'm willing to sacrifice. And so I invest in them regularly and meticulously, not with the expectation of return, but because the practice of friendship, of nurturing friendship, is itself a very enriching activity. And that is something that I'm also not willing to let go of. What else? Things that will get me to, I don't know, the ripe old age of 90, good health, um, enjoying nature, sunscreen, staying out of the sun, hydrating, good food, a good dance. Oh, dancing is non-negotiable. So again, these are things that bring joy. Why would you not dance? Why would you not embrace rhythm and melody and vibes? Why would you not embrace these things? And then another non-negotiable is just this particular vortex-like pull or like whirlpool or black hole-like suction towards aspects of humanity and masculinity that do not make, they just don't bring joy. Why would you persist in particular activities and modes of life that do not enrich you or those around you? That for me is something that I've come to accept as not being negotiable. And then one of the things that has been, I guess, my biggest survival tactic is curiosity. Just being curious. Yeah, asking questions and not being afraid of the answer. And then just going to search for information about things that interest me or that I have no idea or knowledge about. Curiosity. Basic curiosity.
You spoke about rest, and what does rest look like for you?
So I do not have the luxury of calling myself a full-time writer in the sense that I wake up and writing is my first and primary concern. I have occupations that pay for the cost of living. However, rest for me is stepping outside of those occupations and doing things that might appear whimsical or frivolous to the outside world, or to someone who is not me, they might appear frivolous. That for me is rest, because in that moment, I'm not engaged with economic concerns. I'm engaged with art and designing or creating things for no other purpose other than the fact that I'm enjoying them in that moment. Rest looks like sleep. Rest looks like a long walk with my dogs. Rest looks like sitting around on the couch listening to good vinyl records. Rest looks like having friends over and just having, again, frivolous conversations about our lives and what we worry about and what we think about and what we've experienced. Rest looks like sharing and curating my newsletters where I share things that I've enjoyed, that I've come across. Is this monetized? Does it make me money? Absolutely not. Do I enjoy telling people, yo, I came across this podcast, or I saw this photographic essay, or I read this book, or I listened to this song? That brings me joy. So that looks like rest, because the creation of this newsletter does not look like the things that I do in order to pay for my life on this earth. So rest takes many forms, and those are just some of them.
Yeah, so for you, rest is, I hear joy again, but also it's really, I don't know if I can say that, but it's really a sort of a form of resistance to the productivity, performance, the moneymaker other side of the.
I've been part of that hustle culture, and in some ways and in some days, I still have to participate because of this game that we're all seemingly trapped in. I have been part of that culture that says no days off. I have been part of that culture that says wake up and grind. I have been part of that culture that says, you gotta work on this thing until you can't work on it anymore, and then you do 3 more hours of that thing. These things have not yielded the results that we've been promised, that I was promised if I participated in these games, in these routines. I have been told that if you do X, Y, Z, and the other, you will be at this pace at A, B, C, and D at this particular age or stage of your life. This has not come to pass. And so I guess maybe because of the disappointments of participating in these things, I'm just taking a step back and saying, I will participate when I can, if I have to. Firstly, if I have to, cool. Then if I'm forced to, then fine. But if I am going to participate, I'm going to definitely find ways of doing it on my own terms and in my own way. And so, yes, rest can be termed as resistance in a lot of ways. Yeah, I think maybe that's a good way of summarizing it.
So let's talk about Africanness. When do you feel most African, and when does that word feel insufficient for you?
It has never felt insufficient. African has always been so broad and so deep and so textured and so layered that there are always new things to discover about being African. I have always enjoyed identifying as African. I have always felt that that is the one true thing about me that is consistent. I was born in Rwanda, I've lived in Kenya, I've lived in Namibia, and I've lived in South Africa. All of these identities have shaped me. You cannot tell me that I am one or the other. All of them have played a part. But I do carry only one administrative citizenship, and that is Namibia. And sometimes that feels insufficient. So African feels like a better and a more holistic way to describe me. I do subscribe to the tenets of Pan-Africanism. I think they are the primary resistance towards a world that is fighting blackness and confining it and finding out ways to stamp it out left, right, and center. And so, yeah, I've never felt it insufficient. I have always felt that there's just always more to this thing. I have always felt that the challenges are overcoming the hurdles that stop people from experiencing the many layers and many textures and the many foods and the many cultures and the different peoples that are bound on this great continent. Those hurdles are things that I've felt acutely. And sadly, the longer you encounter, those hurdles seem to be the ones that define Africans. Difficulty of moving across geographic terrain, challenges of language, challenges of finding the right ingredients to make jollof the way it must be made. Those things have come to define African as scarcity, lack of geographic mobility, denigration of culture, or degradation and loss of culture. Those things have come to define Africanness, and I think that those things are wrong and should be challenged. I've never not felt African. I have always felt this thing. And the older I grow, the more I'm invested in making sure that this thing survives. And then also, I cannot I can't avoid geography. I am also African because I am here and addressing the challenges that me, my community, my country, our continent faces from here, from within the system and the barriers that are existent around me. And so that is a big defining factor because I am in the trenches, boots on the ground. I am not fighting the fight from afar. I am not an armchair general. We are on the front lines here. And so I feel like that is another aspect of Africanness that defines me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you've used the front lines to talk about it. Why did you choose to say the front lines? What does this mean about what you're experiencing from Africa, being African?
Yeah, by frontline, I definitely mean that we are engaged in a fight. We are engaged in a fight to preserve our ways of life, our languages, our culture, our food, our rituals, and cultural, what you call it, spiritual practices. This is a fight because the erosive factors are aggressive. Sometimes they're covert, Most of the times they are not. And the overt ones people can spot very easily. But the covert ones, the quiet ones, those are the ones that people are not aware of, and those are the ones that are most maligned. And so when I stand on the front lines, it means that I'm constantly, not in a paranoid way, aware of these things. And through daily practices, I am trying to resist, again, that word comes up again, to resist the erosive factors. I live in Namibia. I do not live in Germany. And so part of living in Namibia means being resistant to ways of thinking that are colonial in nature. Why do we do these things this way? Why can we not do it another way? It means that I am in the, for example, the works that I do with the book, the literary magazine, the festival, the awards, everything that I do, it has to come from a place of resistance, because a natural tendency is to erode our ways of storytelling, the ways we make meaning and identity for ourselves. We are told that our stories do not have as much value as Victorian literature or American Gothic literature or as French literature. And we are resisting this on a regular basis as an art form, as a form of, I don't know, making our way through the world. And so I call it front lines because I am acutely aware of what we're up against or what I'm up against. And I do not mince words when I say that these trenches are messy, but these trenches are also colorful, and it is where we find our community because they are like-minded individuals who are doing the same work as us. And it is also, strangely enough, in these trenches where those moments of frivolity are most prevalent. And you can just laugh and dance amidst the struggle. And you can make art and you can make music and you can make community and you can find family and friendship.
Yeah, I always say that actually, I don't know if it's fair, but I always say that there is a need for chaos and messiness for creativity. That's where it really comes out. The friction, the conversations, the part that is not that comfortable. So, what version of Africa do you find yourself constantly arguing against?
That's an interesting question. It's never been put to me that way. I think firstly, all versions of Africa are relevant, not relevant, are all true. Um, I think all versions of it are true. I think the poverty aspect of Africa is true because, yes, a lot of people are living in destitution or near destitution or being driven towards destitution. That is a narrative I'm actively fighting because that destitution is not self-made. It is a system in which we're all trapped in and then we must all resist and fight. But I do not fight it for its untruthfulness. I fight it for its incompleteness. The version of Africa that I do not enjoy the least is that we are not doing something for ourselves. That for me is just, I can't do it. No, I fight that on the regular. Yes, we have systems that are broken, that might be antiquated, that might not be the best version of themselves, but we're also trying to work and fix these things by ourselves in small and interesting ways. Yes, they're not grand or spectacular, but we are actively resisting kind of do things for ourselves. I also do not, I am not with this vision that we are all bound for diaspora, that things are better on the other side, that the grass is greener. No, I've had the opportunity to travel and move around. I've been to Europe a couple of times. I've been to the Middle East, and I have seen. I don't think diaspora is the solution. You can move abroad for short-term economic goals, and I respect those. You can move abroad for safety and security. I respect that. But I'm also reading the news about the things that are happening to our diaspora brethren and sisters and everyone. I'm just like, this can't be the solution. There's just no way. And so I resist the notion that diaspora is inevitable and that it is the only way to make life, meaningful life and success for ourselves. That version I resisted, knowing full well that I am in a version of local geographic diaspora myself. I am not in my home country, but I have come to realize that that is also fine. as long as I can maintain some form of foothold and presence on the continent, whether it is Namibia, Ghana, Algeria, Kenya, I don't care. As long as it is on the continent, I think a version of me will be happy. I will be incredibly happy. Given again that I do have these Pan-African ideals. As long as I'm somewhere within the lines of longitude and latitude of the continent, I can make things work. I just have to be given enough time and the means to do so. But I do not feel the magnetic pull to elsewhere.
You're all African in a world that keeps asking us to prove we belong. Being grounded is a radical act. Body, blood, breathe. The soil you come from holds memory. And memory holds you.
I'm actually curious, what did your upbringing look like? And, because the journey from Rwanda to Kenya to Namibia, what led your parents them to go to these countries and have you coming along? And also in your upbringing, how do you feel that they managed to share part of their own culture with the new culture that you would create?
My parents have always been driven by economic concerns. We left Rwanda in 1994 because the country was in a desperate state of turmoil. In Kenya, it was work. We moved to Namibia because our parents found work here and they believed and thought that they could make and provide us with a better life. These are normal migration patterns for anyone on the continent in search of a better life. And by better, meaning economic terms. Can our children go to school? Do they have viable careers there? Is it a stable country? Are we going to be subject to the same prejudices or traumas or hurts? I don't think my family is special in this way. I think a lot of families make those considerations. Um, how my parents have done it and how they did it was very simple. They stuck to their cultural practices. They maintained our language. They are incredibly stubborn and resilient. They are very liberal in the sense that they will fight authoritarianism, but they are conservative in the sense that they do not take on new things very easily. They will wait, they will see, they will measure, they will gauge before they commit to any given path. And the reason for this is very, very simple. They do not have all the time in the world. They do not have all the resources in the world. And so for them to commit to any new path meant that if we take this path, if we take on this belief, if we do this, that, and the other, we are going to be in it and on it. They're also incredibly kind and generous, which has helped in adapting to any community we found ourselves in. They made friends easily. They're family driven. And so our family was always our primary source of, again, identity and or comfort. They've always had a very broad outlook with life. They've also, I guess also because they studied internationally and they've moved around also quite a bit, they've always known that if you're going to be on the move, you can't be rigid. You have to be flexible in some ways. Not flexible with principles, but flexible with like, okay, what does our lifestyle look like today? Sometimes there's plenty and sometimes there's less. And you're flexible and you have to be able to adapt to survive. But the things I think that my parents were able to carry with them was always that little bit of hope. And they've been very good about passing it on. And yeah, I still carry those things with me to this day.
When we were talking about movements, you talked about different identities. So, what are these identities that you think that you moved across?
Oh, man. Let's see. What is the first one? The first one was being a delinquent and, yeah, being a very juvenile delinquent, like a typical early preteen kid who's naughty and just uncontrollable. That's the earliest kid. Yeah, no, I was a naughty kid. And the reason why you're not is because you're maybe acting out because you're not seeing, seen, or heard. And I guess this is what all the cool kids do. It's a state, maybe it's a stage all boys go through. But then you sit and you wonder and you're like, where is this getting me? It's not getting me anywhere. So you change and you become quieter and you become more academic focused and you decide to be a better performing student. But then again, this is also not something that just happens. I did this because I was aware. If I do not get this grade, I won't go to this school. If I don't go to this school, I won't go to this high school. If I don't go to this high school, I won't get the chance to live in Tuk. Because at the time I was like, this place is small. I need to be in a bigger place. That's definitely one big some of the changes that I've gone through during my formative years. Being from like just a delinquent to like being a very studious person. Yeah, that's one big thing. What else? That weird transition from like Uber, I guess you could call it like Uber male jock-ish kind of thing, to just be like, what is this nonsense? Like this culture of masculinity that we're all involved in. Like, what are we doing? Why are we all lifting weights but not reading? Why are we all, stuck in this grind culture but we can't rest? No, no, no. Just that's been a big transition. I have gone from what else? Yeah, I've gone from corporate to artistic, or rather artisanal, if you want to call it that. I mean, I'm not really involved in the corporate culture, but that speaks more to like employment. I am now firmly embedded within the artistic community and trying to find sustainable and meaningful economic ways of making things work for myself in that way. Um, I've gone from I've gone from single to married. I've gone from um not having pets to having pets. So now I'm like, I have pet that look, all of these are like micro transitions that no one's really aware of until you look at them and then you're like, whoa, my life, or rather, it's not easy to plan travels when you've got two little doggos to be looking after. Because then that's another consideration factor that other people might not have and might not understand. Who's going to look after my plants? What's a big shift? Yeah, the commitment to being a writer, this lifelong dream that I've always had and that I've always been discouraged from. And this path that has always been hazy, but I've always known that I want to do it and that I need to do it. That's a big transition that took me years to accomplish, and that now I'm on the path. The hard part is staying on it and finding belief that things are gonna work out, I guess. But that's a major ongoing transition. But that's been the biggest one, and identifying as a writer and being confident in identifying as a writer. And then also with all of the attendant practices that come with being a writer, honing your craft, reading, thinking about the world, sometimes just sitting on the couch and daydreaming. Embracing imagination is not the most comfortable thing. And I find the imagination is deeply intimate and personal and wide and deep and scary, but also comforting. But having a lifestyle that embraces imagination as a key component to life making, that's a very big transition.
Yeah, you talked about being discouraged. Who discouraged you from being a writer?
The list of people who didn't discourage me is a lot shorter. This is the fate of a lot of artists, that as soon as you discover that you want to do this thing, the discouragements are automatic. They start off at school, mostly, i.e., this thing will not lead to a successful career. It could also come from the community or your parents, in the sense that, oh, you want to be a musician. We do have that one uncle in our family who is a musician and life has been hard for him. So we will discourage this. And then society, artists are not always favorably looked upon because their practices might call into question things that are wrong within the culture or things that are wrong within the society. So those are definite aspects of discouragement that I've encountered. But the people who do have encouraged me have always been my English teachers, because they realized from an early stage that I had some form of talent with this thing, with storytelling, and that English, it manifested itself within the English language. Arts teachers have always been encouraging. Friends who took me to dance classes have always been encouraging, because again, these are people who have embraced alternativeness as a way of making meaning in their life. Um, who else has been encouraging? Yeah, a lot of people. Now, increasingly, a lot of people who have come to know me and my personality, they're incredibly encouraging, because they know by the time I'm asking about something, it's like he's already committed. He's giving notice. People have reached that stage of knowledge where they're like, oh, okay, yeah. But discouragement it's also economic. Certain things you can't do because they will not remunerate you economically, and the cost of living in the world everywhere are dire and becoming more dire by the day. So when you are focused on just basic mortal survival, there are just certain things that you cannot do because you do not have the time, not the desire. The desire is always there. But when all you're thinking about is water, you don't have time to think about paint, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I want to talk about your relationship to writing, actually. And I would like to know, who are you writing for when the audience disappears?
I think I think the best way to answer that or start explaining is that I write as though there is no audience. So there's always like, who are you writing for? And that is a very strange question, because no writer knows who their readers will be. So it is often a fruitless activity to say, I am writing for a 36, 37, 45, 56 year old man or woman, because that's not who winds up reading your work, or not even reading it and enjoying it. So the idea of having a reader in mind is not very useful. What is more useful for me is writing in a way where I ask myself, what do I want to write, and what do I hope to achieve? What do I hope that it achieves in the world? So it is more fruitful to say, I hope the story makes people think about X, Y, and Z, because those people can exist within a broad demographic. So I don't define my audience. I just define my writing by what I hope it achieves. Or I hope this story conveys softness and what love might feel like. And I hope the story conveys what hurt and isolation might feel like, or grief, or loneliness, or joy, or, anything else. I'd rather define what I hope it to achieve as opposed to who I think will pick it up, because readers come in many forms and guises. And the person you think will read your work actually won't. You think you're writing for like young adults, and actually 45-year-olds are reading your work, because we are all looking to escape and going back to our teenage years. You think you're writing for Gen Zers or millennials or Gen Xers, and somebody else picks up your work who's not part of these generations, who's a boomer, and who finds meaning in it. You think you're writing for Black people, and then a random 75-year-old white woman comes up to you at a festival in Berlin and says, I read your book and it changed me in this, it made me think of this, that, and the other. And you're like, I did not think you would resonate with this, but yeah, you did. And so again, there's this common thread of humanity, of experience, of desire, of curiosity that runs through all people at all times. and it cannot be defined in just one person. People are often surprised by the things that I read. And I know I was not the intended audience, but here I am reading it, not only reading it, but enjoying it and finding meaning in it. And so I think that's the way I think about my artistic practice as well. I'm not only with writing, sorry, but also with photography, which is something else that I do. And it's also something that I'm involved in right now, like curating strange music that you would not otherwise listen to. And again, strange people will come up to you and be like, "Oh, I listened to that album you recommended." I'm like, I did not think you would. You would enjoy that, but here you are clearly having a good time with this thing. So, yeah, keeping room for strangeness is important, I think, for any artist, because you don't know who will be affected by it or when and where they will be affected by it.
What does strange music sound like? Do you have an example?
Strange is maybe not a helpful category, but I so yeah, I call myself DJ Side Quest. Just putting it out there. What is a side quest? A side quest is something you do on the way or on the or to achieving the main objective of something. So let's say today you want to listen to what is a good Afrobeat artist, Davido. Let's say you want to listen to Davido. Okay, this is your mission, to listen to Davido. Do you want to listen to Davido or do you want to listen to Afrobeat? Because those are two different things. Because if you're listening to Afrobeat, then it's like, okay, do you want to listen to West African, East African, Central African, or Southern African Afrobeat? Or do you want to listen to Afrobeat from the diaspora? Because that's got a different texture. Okay, let's say West African. Okay, do you mean Nigerian funk or Ghanaian high life? You see how it starts becoming a little more niche and a little more specific. And then within, let's say, Ghanaian high life, are we speaking decade or are we speaking place? Because then if it's decade, I'll be like, you need to listen to to this artist. And then the things that I'll try, for example, I'll be like, let's try and curate something that is strange, i.e., you thought you wanted to listen to Davido today, but what you're actually going to wind up listening to is like this strange band from Kumasi in Ghana. And you were like, oh, I didn't know this band existed. And so that's what I mean by strange, i.e., unexpected. And the reason why I call it this side quest is because we're trying to wean people off the algorithm, because that algorithm isn't sincere or true. People have paid to be on that algorithm. That algorithm is gamed from the beginning. So you're not actually hearing what you think you want to hear. And if you leave space for curiosity, you're going to encounter music that you didn't know that you wanted to listen to. Here's another example. You might want to start, you might say, oh, I want to listen to something uplifting. I'm like, okay, let's go into jazz. Spiritual jazz specifically, as it was created by Alice Coltrane, John Coltrane, or Pharoah Sanders, or Sun Ra, or whatever. Cool. So those are like the staples of like the spiritual jazz discipline. But let's take like a right turn into Persian jazz. And you'll be like, what? This is like just a whole other world completely. Or Turkish psychedelia. Or listen to like these Malian spiritual compositions that have the same elements that you might find in like John Coltrane's work or Alice Coltrane's work, but like this is just out there. And that's what I mean by strange, unexpected, peculiar, but surprisingly familiar. And that is what I mean by like strange music. Like that is what I mean by the side quest. And yes, once you listen to this, you can go back to the main thing and be like, oh, I see how these things are related and aligned. But I just took this little random deep dive on the way to this thing and I wound up here anyway. Yeah.
So this brings us back to what you said about curiosity, right? Because and when you talked about algorithms, I think it's that, because then the algorithm puts you in a sort of tunnel and you can't see what else is there. And with this sort of side quest. You're kind of forced to open up your mind, be curious, and find familiarity in things that you didn't even know existed. It's sort of it's really a journey. So you take whoever is willing to open up into a journey of, yeah, full of discoveries. That's beautiful. I actually like that you call it strange, unexpected.
Yeah, and I think I say curious because it's always curiosity that so far in my life has always led me to interesting things that I did not think that I would do. Like I woke up, my day's intention at a particular point in university was to wake up and go to lectures and complete my assignments, submit tutorials, and write a test or whatever. I did not know that I was gonna encounter a bunch of unicyclists. And I'd be like, how do you do this? How do you balance like this? And they show you. And before you know it, you've bought a unicycle. And now you're falling and figuring out how to do this damn thing. But after a week, you can do it. And now you're also unicycling around campus. That's what I mean by like curiosity. Did I do all of those things that I set out to do? Yes, I did my lectures. I wrote my tests. I submitted my whatever. But I also picked up this other thing along the way. So that's what I mean by curiosity, opening yourself up to the strange and the unexpected. And as long as it does not deflect you from the main objective of your day or your week or month or life, why not just take this right turn into this thing that you don't know about? Again, if it does not deflect you from a positive thing that you want in your life, why not try? This goes with food, with fashion. Like, yes, we love an all black wardrobe, but what about this fabric from Mozambique? What about this cut? We love the button up. What about this cut though? It doesn't hurt. It doesn't subtract from your life. So why not try this? That has always been like my attitude. And that's okay, what I mean by curiosity. If it's not gonna hurt me, it's not gonna hurt those around me, it's not going to deflect me from the main objectives of my day or week or month or life, which is like at least find a way to make life sustainable. So I'm like, why not? Why not? Why not learn calligraphy? Why not learn cursive?
Unicycle. I love the unicycle.
So man, I learned this thing once upon a time. I have had many lives.
Unicycle around campus.
Unicycling is probably one of like the most odd things I've ever done. I was deep in this community, man. Like we had a little gang. We called ourselves like the Odd Wheels. I mean, like we were. Yeah, I don't even know. I can't even explain to you how I wound up doing this thing, but I did it, and I still can do it. And so it's like this weird thing. Like you'll see someone will be like, "How did you learn how to?" I'm like, "Fam, I don't know. He, this, you're asking too many questions. Stop it." But yeah, because unicycling is one thing. Calligraphy is something that I'm returning to after a long time out of it. Correspondence, basic correspondence, writing letters, sending things off by mail. Again, fighting the algorithm that is email, taking time to correspond with people who matter to you, wondering, walking around art shops or like, and asking, can this fit in an envelope and can I send this to this person? Because I know all they're receiving in their like mailboxes are like invoices, just bills. But if like this weird oddity comes from like halfway around the world, I know that that Tuesday morning is gonna be different for that person. That's what we mean by like joy. It's Is it whimsical? Yes. Frivolous? Yes. Expensive? Not really. Not in the grand scheme of things. Will it change the trajectory of that person's life? Probably not. But will it add joy to that person's day? Yes. And will it give me joy in the creative process of doing that? Yes. So why not? Who's this hurting? Yeah.
So I want to end where we started. And my question is, if Africanness didn't need to be explained or defended, how would you describe what it gives you?
Um It is my feeling and opinion and thought that Africanness has probably been the most complete sense of identity that I've had. It is the most welcoming. It is the most accepting. It is also the broadest and the most diverse identity that I've been a part of. And it is low key the coolest. And this is not to say that others are not, but I am not the others. I'm not Asian. I am not South American. I am not North American. I'm not European. I am African. And because I'm a part of this team, I think it's the coolest. And it is infinitely adaptable and always expanding and changing. And it is so rich. And I think my curiosity always stems from like, there's always something new to discover. There's always something new to read and learn. I don't know, Sarah, does that answer your question?
Of course it does.
I am Rwandan-born Namibian. I hang on to my Rwandanness because that's where I'm from, but that's not where my life and identity is right now. So I am Namibian. That's how I explain myself. But I had the opportunity to visit Zanzibar, which I've never been to in my life. And I went there and it felt strangely enough like, I don't know, like I'd been there before. Something about that place felt familiar. Something felt like I don't know, I can't explain it. And that for me comes from probably the fact that I think that I consider myself African. So there's something universal about Zanzibar. But I also felt this way in Accra. I had a chance to visit Accra. And I said, I fit in here. I just fit in, even though I don't speak the languages, even though I don't know the geography of the city. I felt walking through Makula Market, which is loud, big, disorientating, just an assault on the senses completely. But I was like, oh, I know this. Somehow I know this. But I've also felt that way in Cape Town and Joburg. And I've also felt that way in Maputo. And my curiosity has always been like, where else is this feeling found? And so I've always, my definition of Africanness would be, I think it's just this thing that exists on the continent that when you have taken on your community's identity and struggles and hopes and dreams and all of the wonderful things they're doing to make their lives better, it's just infinitely magnified and reflected elsewhere. And my curiosity is like, where else can I find this? And the challenge is, cool, how do I get there? How do I get there? Yeah, and can we meet each other and can we encounter each other? Will we be allowed to exchange? Those are the challenges, but not the definition. Those are the challenges, not the definition.